Kat Abu-Ghazaleh is the kind of radical Democrat Fox News warned you about. Kat believes you deserve universal health care, groceries, and housing. Where does she think we are? The richest country on earth? Kat isn't a millionaire. She doesn't take PAC money. She can't even afford health insurance herself. How can she possibly relate to normal, hardworking corporations like you and me?
So
Wow.
good. That non-traditional political ad was part of the creative campaign for the progressive congressional candidate, Kat Abu-Ghazaleh. Last month, she narrowly lost her bid in the Democratic primary for a U.S. House seat in Illinois. But part of what made her campaign so unique was that she invested in the local community by using resources to feed people, host accessible events, and turn her campaign office into a space that worked to serve the people it hoped to represent. Now she wants to take that outreach to a larger audience. She recently launched a new organization called Kapow with the goal of helping progressive candidates in purple races all over the Midwest. And Kat joins us now. Also with us, publisher of the newsletter, The Ink on Substack, MS Now political analyst Anand Giridharadas.
And you know, we figured out yesterday that if somebody could get both of your names in like Scrabble, they would be like international
all-time winners.
There we go. We put the names up. That is a win. So Anand, I wanted you to come on for a very specific reason, because she has done what you wrote about Democrats needing to do with influencers. It's an extraordinary story. But Kat, I've got to tell you, I saw that, and I showed it to Mickey. Oh, my God. And then I saw your closing ad, and your closing ad was extraordinary. And at one point, and I make no light of this at all, but at one point, a member of ICE picked you up and must have thrown you 10 feet. And you get up and you start running back at him again. And I said to Meek, I said, that is a winner right there. So thank you for being with us. I want you to talk first, though, about the campaign. And I want you to talk about how well you connected with the campaign. And you would have won the campaign, but for the fact that there's some dirty dealing at the end as far as funding somebody who had no chance of winning. But in campaigning, you really, with Kapow, you really showed other Democrats a great way to connect to their community and do the right thing.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on to talk about this. I thought about how much money gets wasted in campaigns. And what if we spent even a fraction of that trying to feed people, stocking local food banks, funding local clinics, especially with such a large donor base? And so from day one in our campaign, we centered mutual aid and direct action for our kickoff event. We didn't ask for monetary donations. We asked for pads and tampons, which were donated to the Chicago Period Collective. And our campaign office functioned as a place where people could get what they need: food, clothes, winter coats, baby formula, Narcan, diapers. Originally, it started especially with the unhoused community, then the undocumented community, and now a lot of families come to us for what they need. And so after the campaign, we didn't want to just abandon this infrastructure, because this was the #1 persuader for undecided voters. It was the #1 volunteer recruitment tool. People feel helpless in the face of fascism. And so when we say, hey, here's something you can do, and we want you to do it with us, we make politics a team sport, and we're able to serve our community and show our values rather than just tell.
And the thing I always found out and was, well, like, when people voted for me, a lot of people voted for me. They said, well, I don't agree with like hardly anything that you do, that you believe in, but I know you're going to go up and you're going to fight for me. You're going to represent me. And even if you disagree with me, I can pick up the phone, call you, and I may be able to change your mind, because nobody owns you. And that's about her campaign. But when I saw her campaign unfold, I thought about you, because you wrote a book called Influencers, and I thought, Persuaders. It's so sweet. Yeah, that too. So he wrote it, but I call
know what he means.
It's the same.
I don't care if you get my book title wrong as long as you get my name right the way you do, Joe.
Exactly.
Well, I think I did it.
Exactly. So persuaders. I'm a poor country lawyer. I'm still having trouble reading. But I thought about you because even though I don't know the title of the book, I knew the contents of the book. And you were talking about Democrats don't know how to connect to communities. Who's sitting to your right, I think, is offering an extraordinary blueprint because even after she lost a heartbreaking campaign, she said, hey, by the way,
we keep going.
We keep going. We keep helping the community. Campaign for politics over. The campaign to help people continues. Talk about that.
Yeah, we were sitting just in the green room right now chatting, and I had that feeling of like, when you write about something, saying it should exist, and then you actually encounter it in the world, it's a very nice feeling. Doesn't happen a lot. Let me just put what I find so appealing about what Kat is doing in a context, which is, if you think about how historically unpopular Donald Trump has been in his second term, and you look at that math as you highlight every day, and you then look at how much has that, we're in a two-party system, how much has that historic unpopularity of this leader become support for Democrats? The answer is very disappointing. In other words, Donald Trump is historically unpopular, and Democrats have found a way to benefit from that almost not at all. And that, to me, comes from a lack of real reckoning about what is the connection to community, as you said? How are we trusted? Are we out of touch with voters in terms of, as Kat was highlighting, the wealth of the candidates we run, the age of the candidates we run? Are we embedded in communities? Are we running and embedded all over this country? And, in The Persuaders, one of the core ideas I wrote about was this notion of movements need to be homes, not just opinion factories, right? Not just places that have positions you might agree with, but actual homes. And to your point about when you were running, if you create that sense of home in a movement, you're my people, you take care of me, you may feed me, you're in my community, I see you, I'm willing to then tolerate differences on individual issues because I have an underlying issue, sort of like you do in a family, right? You don't need to agree with everybody in your family because there's a deeper baked trust. Well, movements can have that kind of trust. And I think it is inarguably the case. I've never spoken to any group around this country that is passionate about the cause of democracy in the age of Trump that feels the Democratic Party speaks to them, connects to them. They vote for it, but there's not a lot of passion. And so I think what Kat is pointing to is the notion of home. As she just said, show, don't tell. If you want to advocate for universal health care, that's a wonderful policy position that'll take place 10 years from now if it wins today. There's a lot of ways to show people that value now. There's a lot of ways to set up in public parks on a weekend and have volunteer doctors doing consults. There's interesting grassroots stuff happening around the country. I am glad that you are trying to bring this to the national level and teach other campaigns to do this.
Yeah, Kat, understanding that winning a congressional race in Evanston is different than winning statewide in Missouri, can you just speak a little bit to potential candidates or people running right now, just about what you learned, what you took away from the experience of running for office, what worked, maybe what didn't work, and what you would advise others running now?
Yeah, so we came in a close second in a field of 16. We won the city of Chicago as well as McHenry County, which is the most conservative part of our district. So two very different political ideologies here. And that's because of that idea of showing and not telling, that idea of home. And so we at Kapow, and if anyone wants to learn more or contribute, they can go to kapow.works, K-A-P-O-W. We're helping other candidates do the same. We are trying to make this the expectation rather than the exception. If you actually want to connect with people, show who you are, get creative. I feel like we have just become rote in politics. We're doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's just not going to happen. We have to do something different. And I think we should start that with helping people.
I love that. A look at something on the national level. Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia has released a new campaign ad ahead of the midterm elections, focusing on affordability and the corruption that he says holds ordinary Americans down. Here's part of the spot.
We're told a story Work hard, play by the rules, and you'll thrive. No matter who you are or where you start, the grind will pay off. But for too many, this story just isn't true. Groceries, rent, insurance, taxes, the car note, the power bill, the math doesn't work.
I was so happy to graduate college, but why is rent so expensive?
2 out of 3 Americans told us they're stressed about their own finances.
No matter how hard you hustle, you can't get ahead. The culture wars are exploited to divide us. While insurance companies get away with denying our claims, while hedge funds buy up all the houses in our neighborhoods, while we have to pay $3,000 for an ambulance. You aren't the problem. Neither are your fellow Americans. The problem is a corrupt and failing political system. The problem is that the people's elected representatives don't represent the people. They represent the donors and special interests. Corruption is why things don't work for ordinary people.
You know, I saw this ad yesterday, Claire. It's 4 minutes. And he goes on and talks about specifically corruption with Big Pharma and why politicians won't do the right thing on medical costs. And I sat there, especially in that first minute and 10 seconds or so, and I thought, everybody's always saying, oh, Democrats don't have a message. Yeah, they have a message, and I think Jon Ossoff gave a pretty damn good distillation of what that message needs to be.
Yeah, and, you know, we've talked some in the show this morning about the Supreme Court. There's now a race for what is the worst Supreme Court decision in our lifetime, but Citizens United has to be up there. Because if you look at what's happened in these races, there is more people now giving $5 and $10 to political campaigns than ever in the history of our country. Democrats are actually staying somewhat even in hard dollars because of low donations from folks who maybe watch this program and find a candidate they care about, like Kat. But the dark money behind the curtain is so huge, and it's coming from those very places that Ossoff refers to in that ad. And that is really what is fomenting the kind of corruption he's referring to. And Kat, I want to ask you, I think you have hit on something in that candidates need to get out of doing it the way it's always been done, and they need to do it differently. What I want to ask you about is what happens after these primaries. I think, listen, I ran for office the first time. I may have even been younger than you are the first time I ran. So young people have run for office for a very long time because I'm older than dirt. So I think the thing that is important, and I ran primaries against incumbents. Yeah. So it's possible to do it. But afterwards, the key thing is, how do we keep the party together? You lost a heartbreaking narrow loss after doing things differently and inspiring a whole lot of people. How has the unity gone in terms of the congressional district you ran in? Because if we're going to fight the fascism you referred to, we've got to stay unified, even if when a progressive candidate wins or someone who is campaigning against a very progressive candidate wins a primary. Talk about unity.
I think that unity comes from a shared goal. I believe that everyone deserves housing, groceries, and health care with money left over to save and spend and equal rights. And I think that the vast majority of people want that too. But we also need to be holding people in our own party accountable. And there are some that don't believe in that are in the way of our own agenda of trying to help others, of not caving to Trump. And so that unity in my own district has been fantastic. We're one of the most progressive districts in the nation, and people from all over our district in the Chicago area have been wanting to get involved in our Org Kapow, but also we're trying to figure out how we can help them. But the same can't be said about every other district in this country. And when it comes to unity, we need to get on the same page. It's about approach. It can't be about a different goal. That goal has to be fighting for the working class. That goal has to be about defeating oligarchs, of not caving to big money interests like crypto, AI, and AIPAC. We have to be unified in that message. And I think if we do that, we can truly bring this party to what it once was, the party of the New Deal and the Civil Rights Act.
So that Ossoff ad, and it does paint these sort of shadowy big figures, corporations and the like, as being the enemy. Obviously, you touched upon that in your campaign as well, Kat. Yesterday, the Supreme Court had this ruling. So which I think a lot of people will be outraged about, but there is a sense, there's a fear that people could feel like hopeless. Like the system is rigged against us, whether it's big money interests or institutions working against us. So how do you navigate that? Like, what would your message be to Democrats who are heading to the polls this November, like to sort of understand that feeling of frustration, but say, no, actually, your voice, despite the fact that deck seems stacked against you, your voice still could count?
Let me actually completely reframe the moment as a hopeful one, which is, so I wrote Winners Take All, a book about this billionaire class and oligarchs, 2018. When I was making that case in 2018, I could feel that how uphill it was, not just on the right, but a lot of Democrats were like, why are you criticizing the power Bill Gates has? He means well, these kinds of things. I would say I don't get that pushback in 2026. The conversation has changed. The far right includes, and I don't agree with them on the issues, but it's worth noting that within MAGA, there's a pretty significant anti-oligarch ideology. They don't live up to it. They don't pass laws on it. But there's a significant, it's an intellectual current there that didn't exist there before. I would say on the broad left, this is now where the energy is, kind of an anti-oligarch thing. Jon Ossoff is not a flaming progressive, and yet that's the ad. And I think people, when you talk about affordability, when you talk about oligarchy and some of these ideas, Joe Biden's closing message, his equivalent of Washington's farewell address, was about oligarchy, right? This issue has gone mainstream. I think regular people understand it. And this notion of corruption and affordability as the kind of these I think people have found a more relatable way to frame this than maybe I and others did a decade ago, which is there is a group of people who have this power. They're making your life hard, but there's a lot of energy. When you see Zoran being the mayor of New York City today, as simple evidence, there's a lot of energy around taking power back. I think there's a lot more consciousness that's been raised. I think it's actually more in grasp than ever. I'd be way more optimistic about this today than I was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think also things have gotten worse, not better, which helps as well.
Let me add, Kat, final thought.
I mean, I think that's right on the money. Like, look, if this was hopeless, they wouldn't be trying so hard to stop us. They wouldn't be sending armed goons on our street. They wouldn't be trying to take our voting rights away. They wouldn't be trying to subjugate the 99%. But we are more powerful than them. And I think the vast majority of Americans realize that we're the ones with the power, and it's time for us to flex it.
Former Democratic congressional candidate for Illinois, Kat Abigazzala, and MS Now analyst Anand Giridharadas. Thank you both very much for coming on this morning.